All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Before we get started, I want to inform you that a Spanish interpretation is available. And actually, I'm not going to inform you about that. I'll turn it over to our interpreter, Regina Blanco, for instructions on how to access that interpretation.
Thank you very much for that, Regina. Lovely to share your name. Buenos días a todos. Es un gusto ser su intérprete el día de hoy. Para acceder a la interpretación en español, por favor, haga clic en el icono de mundo en la barra de herramientas y seleccione el canal de su preferencia, ya sea inglés o español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. So I'll just pause a little bit to let folks take advantage of the interpretation available. But hello, good afternoon. I'm Regina Celestin Williams, and I'm the executive director here at Silicon Valley at Home. And we are excited to host you all for a conversation about the housing needs of the undocumented community. Our policy in action at home is a monthly informal discussion convening housers to engage in hot housing topics. Every month, we select a topic or current event, bring in an expert, like we have today, to give a brief presentation, and then open up the discussion to ask questions, float new ideas, and identify potential areas for shared action. So I'm going to ask for the next slide because I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush Ohlone, Tamian Nation, and Amut Mutsun, on which we are learning, working, and organizing today. We are committed to honoring and making visible the Indigenous people and tribes that were intentionally displaced from their land, who remain here in Silicon Valley and are a part of our community. So now we'll get to the program, and I will hand it over to our moderator for today's discussion, SB at Home's Tenant Protection and Empowerment Associate, Emily Ann Ramos.
Thank you, Ms. Regina. So first, we're going to go over some code of conduct. We want to ensure that the conversations and relationships here today remain respectful and productive. Please be kind and courteous to each other, no rude comments or personal attacks. We encourage asking questions and listening as we learn and engage with each other. Please remember that today's event is focused on the housing needs of the undocumented community. So please keep questions and chat on that topic. Sometimes chat can get a little lively. If you find it distracting from the content of the discussion, we encourage you to consider closing the chat temporarily. If a person is disruptive or otherwise violates the code of conduct policy, they may be removed with or without warning. So now we will now introduce our guests today. Today we're welcoming Huy Tran, Executive Director of Siren Immigrant Rights and Education Network, to share about the current conditions and their impacts on the immigration community. Then we'll talk about housing access and protections for the undocumented and missed status families, closing with a call to action. So Huy Tran is a lifelong advocate for immigrant and worker rights. The son of Vietnamese refugees, Huy began organizing in high school and continued through San Jose State University, where he led efforts to fight budget cuts and build national Vietnamese youth networks. His passion for justice led him to work as a labor organizer with Unite Here. After earning his law degree from Santa Clara University, we co-founded Justice at Work Law Group, representing immigrant workers in wage theft, discrimination, and harassment cases, while also supporting nonprofit infrastructure. He played a key role in advancing anti-wage theft ordinances across Santa Clara County and has served on multiple local commissions relating to housing, equity, and community safety. Now, as the executive director of Siren, Huy leads efforts to empower immigrant communities through legal services, civic engagement, and policy advocacy, ensuring that all people, regardless of status, has a voice and a right to dignity. So with no further ado, please welcome Huy Tran.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I actually have a slideshow to share as well, so I'm going to go ahead and just get to that. Also, apologies for the random sound effects. No idea where that's coming from, but I'm glad that we have a powerful moderating team that is taking care of it and making sure that we all get to enjoy the experience today. So thank you for sharing that the slides here for us, Carrie. Why don't you go to the next slide? All right, cool. So M gave you like that really formal introduction, but let me just tell you a little bit more about myself too, right? Some of the cool stuff here. I am the child of refugees. My parents are boat people who arrived in the United States. My father in 1980, my mother in 1981, and I was born in 1982. Because of that status, I'm actually a citizen of the United States by birthright, meaning 14th Amendment for me. Those are the kind of things that try to make the immigrant experience real for communities across the board. And we're getting to a point where it's important to share these stories to show that immigration is not just a Latino issue. It's one that affects all of us, especially these days when migration, when global migration patterns means that we actually have people coming into the United States from across the world, right? I also am a social justice advocate. I've dedicated my adult career to working around social justice as a union organizer around the country, and then working in the community as well. I am also a big Raiders fan, Raider Nation for life. Apologies to any of the Niners fans here. Well, not really. Also an outdoor enthusiast. Actually just completed the Lost Coast Trail. Did about 25 miles up in Humboldt County, and it's a once in a lifetime experience. I encourage you all to try it if you can, if you're interested. And lastly, I can be a karaoke mic hog. So go-to, of course, is anything from the 90s, and just kind of makes things a fun time, though I did just date myself a little bit. All right, next slide, please. All right, so for today's presentation, I wanted to be able to cover 4 different things here, right? I think it is important for everyone to understand what's been happening on the ground. Meaning like when we're seeing stories on the news, right? Those are little snippets of what you get to see at a time, but maybe we can provide more context so that we all understand too what a mass deportation agenda actually looks like. And then from there, we can go into a discussion of what the biggest concerns are out of the in the immigrant rights space, right? Covers a few different areas here. We can also cover what we're learning, right? What we're learning about tactics and strategies and where and how we're seeing the different tactics they employ being used in different parts of the country because it's not uniform. And then lastly, y'all, let's talk about what we need. All right, what is it that as an immigrant rights movement we need? But also, like, what is it that we all collectively need? Because we need to look at the issues we deal with in a way that doesn't other the immigrant and refugee communities, but rather acknowledges that we're all part of a larger collective. We're all part of a larger community, and protecting immigrant and refugees, fighting for immigrant refugees is the same as fighting for ourselves. All right, so with that, let's go on to the next slide. All right, so first, on the ground, let's just cover what we've experienced. I'm going to go through a very quick recap of, let's just say, the past 7 months, okay? Very quick. Next slide. All right. So the first immigration enforcement actions that we actually saw here in California occurred around January 10th. Now, why is that date important? That predated the inauguration of our current president. Right? That was a border patrol operation led in Kern County, where border patrol agents actually went through the streets of these communities, like outside of Bakersfield, and just started detaining people. Now, I want to be clear about how that operation played out. Border Patrol had agents conducting sweeps. They were literally going through communities, and without any evidence that any particular person was, legal or not, they just started questioning individuals and then detaining them. Now, we can say this for a fact because this was actually litigated. The UFW Foundation filed a lawsuit against Border Patrol for how it conducted that operation in Kern County, and a federal court found that that Border Patrol agents violated the Constitution and acted in a discriminatory manner because they did not have probable cause to suspect that any of the folks that they detained were actually undocumented, right? There was no evidence. Because there was no evidence, the only thing that agents were working off of when they were going around to conduct their sweeps was how people looked, right? Now, that's going to be something that comes back up. We'll talk about that again in a little bit, but recognize here, you all, that when we're talking about indiscriminate raids, indiscriminate sweeps, you can't tell a person's status by looking at them, right? Status is a piece of paper. When we look at people and we just start questioning a group of folks based on a physical trait or a physical characteristic or what language they use or sound like, we're definitely getting into that arena of discrimination. And that's backed up now by not one, but two federal court decisions. And we'll get to the second one in a little bit. The next thing that actually happened is that basically 2 weeks after that operation in Kern County, we saw the first operation happen in San Jose. Now, to be clear, what happened in San Jose in the last weekend of January was not a raid, it was not a sweep. It was a targeted operation where they were going after a person they had already identified that for deportation, a person with the removal order. When that happened, though, there was immediate fallout. People reacted right away. Fear took place in the communities very quickly. Local businesses started seeing like a lot less foot traffic, and the local we have the local service agencies saying that folks who, their attendance for their programs dropped dramatically, and we're not recovered yet, and it's been 7 months. Next slide, please. Now, since then, if we're focused on the Bay, we still have yet to really see widespread raids or sweeps. We still continue to see specific actions and specific tactics that are being employed in different settings, but nothing to the scale of what we saw in that first operation out in Kern County, and for sure, nothing like what we're seeing happening now in LA. So focusing in on the Bay, what we see is that it's still primarily focused on targeted operations. And what I've highlighted on the screen here for you are a couple of those stories. The person on the left here, the gentleman, his name is Ulysses Peña Lopez. For anyone who didn't follow on his case, he was a man who was sitting in his car when ICE agents approached him. And when they wanted him to come out to and question him, he refused. They didn't have a warrant. Their reaction was to smash his car windshield and drag him out of the car. He had a pre-existing condition that led him to react physically, and while they were en route to actually get into a detention center, they had to turn around and bring him out to El Camino Hospital. And there was a lot of people who are mobilized there so that his wife and his child would at least be able to see him in the hospital. But the moment after they had that opportunity to to allow Mr. Lopez here to see his family, he was then shifted and he was immediately moved into a detention center, and he is still in detention. Now, the person on the right is Guillermo Medina Reyes, a person who actually also did do a stint in a detention center. However, while he was detained and in a detention center, he protested the dramatic conditions inside of the detention center because it was rough, right? He went on a hunger strike along with another person who was in detention with him. They called attention to the poor food conditions, the poor living conditions, right? To the things that they were just deprived of. And he was ultimately released from the detention center. Last month, though, he was told not last month, about 3 weeks ago, he was told by ICE that when he showed up for his check-in, he was going to be detained again and he was going to be deported. But because he stayed active after he came out of detention, he stayed active with the immigrant rights movement. He made sure that he was present across the state for actions happening all over the place. People showed up for him. About 200 people showed up for his ICE check-in that happened in San Jose. And that was a very tense morning, to say the least. But what the outcome was that he was not arrested. Now, that was part because his attorneys, very good attorneys from Pangea Legal Services, were able to get an injunction against his arrest and deportation. But that was temporary. We're still keeping eyes on his case. But last we heard, he prevailed on his permanent an injunction against his arrest and deportation because of his very unique circumstances. He's been in the country longer. He is not subject to immediate arrest and immediate detention and immediate deportation. And it took a judge to issue an order against ICE telling them that they had to follow the law, where they actually are now trying to follow the law. Now, outside of that, though, we're seeing ICE use additional tactics right? You all may have seen some of this on the news, right? Besides these individual operations, ICE is trying to find additional ways where can they just scoop people up. One of those are ICE agents sitting outside of the immigration courthouse. They sit there, and basically the attorneys for the DOJ will try to have these procedural maneuvers where the case itself is dismissed and nothing's going to happen on it anymore. And when that happens, you've got four vans outside of courthouse and like about 8 agents who are sitting there. And if your case is dismissed and you now no longer have a claim for asylum, or you no longer have a petition for against a deportation or any of those kind of motions, they'll grab you right away. You don't get to go home. You don't get to say goodbye. You don't get to do anything. They just pick you up, put you in a van, and now you're off. They were also using a tactic called ISAP check-ins and wellness checks. That's where, like, if a family is trying to petition for some kind of status, the ICE agents will reach out and say, "Hey, we actually want to do a check on the welfare of the minor." But when families show up, they're also ready to detain the parent if the parent has no authorization or no documentation, or a sibling, right? They're trying to use these opportunities where it's a kind of a pretext for why you have to show up and meet with them to then detain anyone else that they can. Um, so now I'm going to touch briefly in on LA. All right. I don't have a slide prepared on this piece specifically, but I wanted to just kind of share that what LA is, what we saw happen in LA, all that is absolutely the worst of what we've seen so far. In LA, when I showed up, and there was resistance, there was opposition to what they were trying to do. They were just trying to, again, do mass sweeps, mass raids. They decided that they were going to call in the National Guard and the Marines to back them up. Now, they called in the Marines and the National Guard to be there to, quote unquote, protect the ICE agents. But we did say that we have seen instances where people in military uniform are actually part of arrest operations. Right. Now, a lot of that is being litigated, but the big part of what came out of LA was the announcement that ICE would basically plant itself in LA for 60 days. We are, I think, about at week 5, or well, actually, no, maybe like closer toward the end of the end of the 2-month period here, the 60-day period, because now the National Guard and the Marines have left. But you've still got ICE agents planted in LA. And while they're doing these general sweeps, these general raids, right, it's the same problem they had in Bakersfield, where there's no evidence of a person's status at that initial point where a person is being questioned or detained, or even like temporarily held so that they can be questioned, right? This also came out in another lawsuit that was again filed by, I think it was actually filed by Churla this time, to challenge the tactics of ICE here, because they, without having any kind of evidence about who has status and who doesn't, what they were essentially doing was going to Home Depots, going into restaurants, going into different neighborhoods. And anyone who was brown or spoke with an accent or spoke in Spanish, they would just arrest them and then start questioning them about, hey, prove to us you've got papers, right? And there was a lot of issues along the way. They were arresting U.S. citizens. They were arresting, a Marine was arrested, right? A soldier was arrested. And a court, again, found that ICE was acting in a discriminatory manner, in an unconstitutional manner, because they didn't have any evidence to justify these initial transactions where they questioned people about their status. And instead, they were just targeting people who were brown, who had an accent, or who were hanging out in the wrong area. Right. Next slide, please. Now, I've shared a lot about what we've learned, but let's talk about the trends, right? More of what we have seen happening with different tactics that would play. Next slide. So there are two main things around what we see happening around the country. The first, and this is one of those trends that kind of became obvious over time, but the most dramatic actions weren't actually happening here in San Jose, in California yet, not until LA happened in June, right? What we were seeing initially was that a lot of these tactics, a lot of these strategies that ICE and these agents were employing, they were being tested out in other places first. It would start typically in places where there was local support for immigration enforcement. So we saw more of the draconian actions happening in Florida, in Texas, and Tennessee. From there, it would migrate into I'm going to call them the battleground states, right? Where there's maybe national implications, but there wasn't as much local support. So we would see operations happening in Chicago, right? Illinois. We'd see them take effect in Minnesota, right? From there, those tactics would then make their way closer to like the border, right? And namely for we're in California, where that meant, it meant San Diego and LA, Inland Empire, right? So we started seeing that's where these strategies would go in. At some point, some of these strategies would then come make their way up to the Bay Area. Now, I say that not to kind of lull us all into a sense of security, right? California is the biggest target in the union. We have the largest population of immigrants. We have the strongest laws that protect against immigration enforcement, or excuse me, that protect against cooperation with immigration agents, right? So why is it then that we're not seeing so much? And I would be really frank with you all, it's because they're not prepared for it, right? LA is very much a clear example of them not being prepared for what a local response is going to look like or can be. ICE itself as an agency has about 8,500 agents for the entire country. That's going to change now that the new federal budget has been adopted and the budget for the Department of Homeland Security has gone up 10 times. It is now the most funded law enforcement agency in the entire country. I mean, before the new budget was adopted, ICE was actually smaller than the New York Police Department, right? Now we're going to look at it being about 3 times the size, or at least that's what the current projections are. So there is at this point now a lot more resources, and we have to expect that the enforcement actions we've seen take place in other parts of the country are going to come a lot closer. And at some point, it's just going to sit right here in our communities. And we're going to have to just be as prepared for that as we can be. The second part here is the narrative, right? Now, the narrative around immigration has been constant and consistent since the entire election season, but is continuing, right? I think oftentimes what we see is during an election, whatever things people were say, it would stop. Election day is done, like we're all going to unify as a country, right? But that's not the case anymore. I don't know how many of y'all are fans of 94.9 or any of the music stations, but you all, I hear Kristi Noem's voice now, like all the time, right? They are paying for airtime. I've seen commercials on TV, right, where they are trying to project this narrative that all of this immigration activity is centered on the ideas of law and order, and they're going after the worst of the worst criminals, right? That message saturation is going to continue as well. So it's very important, and we'll get to this in the call to action piece, that you pay attention to it, but we challenge it at every opportunity that we get to. All right, next slide, please. What are our biggest concerns around what's happening, right? I mean, we're seeing it more. Now, of course, the big concern is the immigration actions themselves, the raids themselves, the destructions of the families and the communities that we're all in. But that plays out in very specific ways. And I'm hoping to actually we can illuminate some of that for you all. All right. Next slide. So one thing that is very obvious, and I think most relevant for you all, is there is a strategy at play here of restricting resources for immigrant families. We're seeing this play out in healthcare. We're seeing this play out in education. And as it stands, even as of this morning, we're seeing it now play out in the housing space. Right now, I mentioned this morning because I literally just got the email notification for it. So I didn't have an opportunity to put it into my slides. And forgive me, I don't know how interactive this piece is, but I just wanted to just maybe get a show of hands here. If y'all can use the react button here. If you all heard about what happened in San Francisco and how the federal government is now trying to restrict the use of Section 8 funds for mixed status families, right? If you all have the ability to like thumbs up or whatever, like if you've heard about it. Okay. Seeing some hands coming up here. There you go. Right. And I will share, I found out about this just this morning. Okay. So I'm sure this is going to start making the rounds for you all. And now, so specifically what's happening is ICE is requesting information from the San Francisco HSA. I'm sorry, I don't know what that acronym is. They're requesting information from SHA to like get information about the beneficiaries, right? Right now, it looks like they're trying to assess like if this is just for Section 8 or not. But we're also seeing now the mayor of San Francisco releasing a statement to try to explain, hey, look, what does this inquiry mean? What does it mean for your benefits? What does it mean for like, you know, everything that you know, like that may mean for your families, right? This is a specific strategy approach that is not a secret. This is something that was discussed in the Project 2025 book, right? There's this belief. Oh, thank you for clarifying. It's the SF Human Services Agency. Thank you. There's this kind of this belief that all these federal funds are somehow being funneled into supporting, you know, immigrant families or, you know, folks who don't have status, despite the fact that, you know, folks who don't have status are ineligible for almost all federal benefits, with the exception of emergency services, right? So, what we're seeing this regime do is it is taking these steps to try to scare service providers into not providing benefits at all to immigrant families, right? They do this through inquiries. They do these through these letters, these communications where they're just like, hey, we're going to investigate you, right? We want you to send information to us. We're also seeing like the various agencies take specific steps where they are just trying to get information as a way to hand it over to ICE, right? And so that's actually the second area of concern that is also like driving fear into our families, right? The things that we could have taken for granted before as something that's very private really aren't there anymore, right? And we saw this first with IRS data, right? For many families who don't have status, their way of working and paying taxes, all that, is to get an I-10. And for that information, the way IRS operated was none of that information would be shared anywhere outside of the IRS, right? I mean, unless it's the most narrow of circumstances, the information that the IRS collects is supposed to be protected. And that is no longer the case. All right. We've also seen this happen with Medicaid, where Medicaid information has been passed over to ICE. We're seeing now, like this is the first instance I've seen of it, but clearly is now applying to housing benefits as well. And there's more efforts now to try to kind of close that, like, put a stranglehold on the resources that families can lean on to get the support that they need to take care of their families. Next slide, please. Now, there also is a cost to what we're seeing, right? I referenced earlier the operation that happened in January. Now, that happened specifically at on Story Road, where Target is, right? It's right across the street from Emma Prush Park, for anyone who's familiar with that neighborhood. That Target, well known, very popular, right? ICE, that Target allowed ICE to set up its operations in their back parking lot, the private one that's usually just for their staff. Since that operation has occurred, local businesses, right, in those plazas said foot traffic to their restaurants is down 20%. The organizations that work in there, like Amigos de Guadalupe, in their continuing conversations actually report back that these Eastside businesses now have said that their foot traffic has even gone down by 30%, right? So it went from 20 to 30% since then. You know, some of the service providers in the East Side, like Grill Family Services, reported almost immediately that since that operation happened in January, the number of attendants that they get to the programs that they offer also dropped 20%. Like, it's consistent, right? That cost plays out in its ripple effects, right? This is why we say that when these enforcement actions come in, it's not just harming the families and the individuals, it's harming the communities, right? Because these are people who make our community what it is. They spend money, they work, they show up to programs, they help build that space where folks feel like they have a home. And we see that destroyed, decimated, because the federal government is coming in like the military just to disappear people off the streets. But it is the well-being of families that is also of a concern for us. One of the roles that Siren takes on is that we are a steering committee member for the Rapid Response Network. And we see oftentimes that we get the calls from people who in the community who are terrified of anybody in a uniform. It is fearful for folks who are, it is incredibly, it can be incredibly taxing and harmful for individuals who they have to take their kids to school, but they're afraid to leave their home because they see somebody in a uniform, right? A lot of the calls that we get are people who think it's ICE. Turns out it might be San Jose PD. It could be the Santa Clara County Sheriffs. It could be another agency, right? But when there's so much fear that the moment you walk out the door, you may never see your family again. Anybody in a uniform looks scary, right? That's one of the destructive factors of what we're seeing happening right now with these immigration enforcement actions, right? There's an erosion of trust. There's an erosion of faith. And people are just terrified. For the work that we do here in Siren, right, we work with community members to do organizing. We try to uplift their voices, right, so that immigrants themselves are the ones advocating and speaking up. And I have the benefit of working with some of the most courageous families I've known in my life. But since the new regime has got inaugurated, these folks they can't speak up as much anymore, right? They just don't feel safe doing it. We actually have some clients for our legal services who just self-deport because they are terrified. Like honestly, like these are just gonna give context. 80% of our removed offense clients are victims of domestic violence. 20%, close to 20%, are fearful of returning to their countries because of their sexual orientation. Right. Then we have like another piece of folks who actually fled their country because of their political activity, right? They organized in their home countries and they were targeted and retaliated against for that. We have families who, despite those fears that they have of going back to the home country, when they experience what's happening here right now, they just think, you know what, not worth it. I'm just going to go back, right? That for us has been heartbreaking work. It's something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. Next slide, please. All right, call to action. And I do want to respect time. I apologize, kind of stretched it out a little long here. And I know that M has information to share too. So 4 things. You all are housing experts. I'm going to lean in on that, but also on a broader thing, on a broader call to action. Okay, next slide. So 4 things to focus on, okay? First is this, resources, what you all offer in terms of support for housing, right? While as that space for resources for immigrant families just continues to shrink, you got to keep doing what you do. Keep the resources flowing to your clientele. And that also means be advocates for that, right? When you see any kind of proposal or funding cuts that are coming your way or being like advertised like, hey, we're going to take these resources away, or hey, you can't use these resources for immigrant families anymore. You all are the specialists, and because you all are the specialists on the housing front, like we need you to speak up. I mean, I've done some work on housing, you all. I cannot say I know as much as M. I can't say I know as much as Regina or any of the folks here in this space, right? So, like, include that as part of your work. Like, speak up against those cuts. The second thing here is more broad, right? And it's actually more about the individual accountability, but it's the narrative, right? What has justified all of this abuse of immigrant families is this narrative that immigrant families, right, migrants are criminals. And we see that play over and over and over. But let me tell you this, we know we can establish through just like various media reports and research efforts that half of the people who have been detained so far have 0 criminal convictions, not even a traffic infraction. And then another 20 to 25% on top of that, the worst they have is a traffic infraction, right? So that narrative, though, it's the tail wagging the dog. Anytime you hear somebody saying, hey, look, they're just grabbing the criminals, it is absolutely not true. But even if that was, why do we have public defenders? It is to keep our system honest, right? We can't just say, hey, as long as they're targeting the criminals, it's fine. Because the reality is that an honest system, a just system, affords those rights to every single person in it. Because if we don't have those due process rights, at some point, What's to keep them coming after citizens, right? Because if you don't have due process rights for the person who's accused of a crime, then anybody can be accused of a crime. Lastly, I'm sorry, the other two parts is activate, right? You have a base. You all have a base by working with your clients or working with your community, working with your networks. Activate them. You can, if you have clients who need legal services, refer them to us, or if they're looking for ways to get involved and engage, refer them to us, right? We work specifically with immigrant families, mixed status families. That's like, we need to build that base where we can get more activation going. Also, hey, work with us. We are super down to find additional partnerships. We are in a whole bunch of coalition spaces. It's not easy to try to manage it, but the more we can find opportunities to work together, the more that we can do. And then also too on the solidarity piece, you all, we'll tap into that. And let's go to the next slide. I actually kind of broke down each year, and I'll make it quick here. But on the challenging the narrative piece here, I don't know if you all recognize this man. This is David Huerta. It was how ICE treated him that sparked a whole bunch of reactions across LA. He's the president of SEIU. Um, and he is there to challenge the narrative, all right? So I mentioned already like why the narrative is wrong. A lot of the people are innocent, right? The detention centers are also cruel. Like there was a family in San Jose that was detained and sent to Texas, and they talked about how their daughters were considering suicide because they were given crappy food. It was cold and then hot, and they were being mistreated to the point where one of the daughters was considering suicide. Now, the family has been released from the Texas Center and they're back here, but that story stays with us. And also, too, what we're seeing down in LA is dangerous, right? When you have ICE agents who don't identify themselves, they created this condition where you got copycats who just go around. They don't have to identify themselves. They just get some vest off of Amazon and claim to be the federal government. Next slide. Solidarity piece, y'all. Show up, support, and stand up. Actions are happening all over the place, and I can tell you that as things continue to press, we're going to see more and more protest. In fact, we have a couple of actions coming up that I can share with you all. There's a rally tomorrow in downtown. It's the Family First Rally that's also organized by SEIU. And then on Wednesday of next week, Labor and Community are holding a training session on how and talk about solidarity. I'll post that in the chat as well. Right, support. You can join the Rapid Response Network. You can volunteer for organizations like Siren. You can be a part of mutual aid networks like Apoyate, right? And then stand up, y'all. When you hear that toxic narrative, you've got to challenge it. At this point, it's what we do on that individual things. And I will tell you this, I've got family who I have to talk to and have very hard conversations with, right? Because like my sister, for example, right, shared with me like, hey, look, I see what you're doing. I empathize. But if they're doing this to the bad guys, I don't mind so much. And I had to like have a frank conversation, like one, that's not happening. And two, like bad guys is not like the word for it, right? Next slide, please. Okay, and then look on the solidarity piece, right? Like things happen really quickly. It's kind of hard sometimes to think about how we can get information out in advance, but this is actually really one of the best ways to find out what's going on, right? On Instagram is our primary platform, but if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see about the actions, you'll see the different things that are going on. We're also on Facebook, though Facebook I think is getting to be a smaller platform, and we're on Blue Sky. We got off of Twitter. That space was way too toxic, but we're on Blue Sky now, and encourage you all to kind of get into that as well. Okay, so I know I've seen there's some questions here. I also recognize M's supposed to like present. I apologize, y'all, but probably went over a little bit here, but thank you for making space, and I'll hand it back to our moderator.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Okay, you guys can hear me. Good, good, good. So Carrie, if you could share my slides, we're gonna add a few more things that people can do. So at a time when there's already a shortage of housing that many families can afford in our community, we know that there are additional significant impacts for undocumented and mixed status families. So let's go into documentation and housing access. We has touched on this. Immigration status can affect access to affordable housing. There's eligibility for Section 8 and federal housing programs that are if you are undocumented, you do not have access to things like Section 8 or vouchers. However, mixed status households may have some ability to access it. The people who are documented in those families are the ones who receive that subsidy. We do know that there are things that are changing within the federal government. And we will be keeping an eye out for that. But as it stands now, mixed status households, you still have access to that kind of affordable housing. If you could go to the next slide, Carrie. Affordable housing funding comes from so many sources, and how it gets those funding is can explain who has access to what. Ways to mitigate some of that is to make other puzzle pieces bigger, having more access to local funding, having more philanthropic funding for some of these affordable housing projects. That is one way. It is a large gap to fill. The government is one of the biggest providers of funding. The federal government is one of the biggest funders for affordable housing, particularly the low income housing tax credit. But due to the nature of it, access to affordable housing may be more possible compared to something like a direct subsidy, such as Section 8 and and yeah, such as Section 8 and those kinds of vouchers. Next slide, please. So what can affordable housing operators do? So one of the big things is do not collect information you don't need. If you do not need to know about your tenant's legal status here in this country, do not ask about it. To continue on that, create a data retention policy. What information do you really need, and who has access to that information? And we also suggest that you provide training and resources to staff and residents on their rights. So if someone could put into the chat, SV at Home has placed on our website resources available, including how to create a data retention policy, how to create a know your rights document, and as well as how to sign up for the Rapid Response Network. And I'll go into that a little later. Now, other things you can do, if you could do the next slide. One thing that is really important in California, immigration status is not relevant to your rights as a tenant in California. Tenant protections apply to everyone. So this includes the statewide rent caps and the eviction protections as provided by AB 1482. Just cause eviction protections are basically, they cannot evict you for any reasons except a set of listed reasons, such as at-fault evictions, such as you don't pay your rent, you cause a nuisance, things like that. And then there's no-fault evictions where the landlord wants to move in or demolish the building. You have a right to your home, essentially. So you also have a right to a habitable home. So repair needs, pest control, and other things. You have the right to organize with other tenants, and you are protected from retaliation for asserting those rights. Regardless of your documentation status, you all have these rights. Next slide, please. There's also anti-harassment ordinances. So currently state law prohibits your landlord threatening to report you to immigration as a form of harassment. And you cannot be evicted based on immigration status. This is covered under California law. Now, local ordinances can go further, particularly in enforcement. Some examples, San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles have these protections in place. Next slide, please. So what cities can do. We recommend funding eviction defense programs that serve undocumented tenants. Or to be more precise, fund eviction defense programs regardless of documentation status, as well as create rental assistance programs and make sure that no proof of citizenship is required for them. Adopt the local anti-harassment ordinance that was mentioned before, and partner with trusted community-based organizations such as Siren. Next slide, please. So we have some call to actions. One of the, oh, yay, everyone's starting to put their resources in the chat. That is a very good set of resources. Once again, I'm recommending checking out the page that we set up on primarily it was for developers and individuals on relating to ICE actions. Please join the Rapid Response Network and then push for stronger tenant protections. And know your rights for yourself and your neighbors. The more people know their rights, the more you could use them to protect yourselves and those you care about. So with that, next slide. Oh, okay. Before we get there, let's start seeing if we can get some questions. Let's go. First question. All right. Someone asked if we would be willing to share any more information about the ICE request to the SF Human Services Agency. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So this is a developing situation. We got notice of it just this morning. While I want to get you more information, the only thing I'm trying to see what we have besides just like screenshot. Like there's an email list where this is actually going in and out. I think I'll try to forward the letter that was sent out from Mayor Lurie to SB at home to share with everyone if that'll help you at all. But I think right now, because this is a developing story, don't have more information to share. But we'll get you what we can.
And thank you everyone for your patience. There's a lot of information going around and things are moving very quickly. It is surprising that it's only been 7 months. Let's see. The next question we have is, beyond red cards, what are others doing to provide information and guidance for staff and residents?
Right. So the red cards are an easy shortcut, right? Instead of having to assert your rights, you present the red card, and that's your way of saying, I don't want to talk to you. You can't enter my home or like enter a private space without a warrant. What Siren offers are know your rights trainings. We offer a variety. Like we have 3 trainings that we offer. One is the individual know your rights. It's basic Fourth and Fifth Amendment information for folks who are worried about how they're going to deal with ICE engagement in their daily lives. We have a second presentation that's focused more on family planning, right? That's where families can learn about what options are available to them if one of the parents or both parents happen to be detained, and how they can plan for the future for their children. The third presentation we offer is actually more for organizations, for agencies, and for businesses, right? And that's a presentation that focuses on how the Fourth and Fifth Amendment apply in the workplace. So if any of your organizations are interested in that, check out our website at sirenimmigrantrights.org. We have a presentation request link there. You just submit the request that way, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Right now, looks like we'll have to schedule those presentations out at least about a month out.
Wonderful. Think about knowing your rights as like our own version of the home moon. I'm really addicted to K-pop Demon Hunters, so
I will also kind of actually share one thing. The Know Your Rights information was actually very, very, very effective and impactful in the early stages, right? Because just to be clear, ICE agents aren't investigated. It's not an investigative body, right? ICE agents aren't like officers or law enforcement in the way we think of police or sheriffs, right? It's more like population control, right? Their prime objective is to go and just pick up people who they would believe aren't like supposed to, who aren't supposed to be here in the country. And for that reason, ICE agents were being stymied initially because they were just trying to go up and pick up anybody. That's where we see the lawsuits happening, right? But there was actually also a lot of video evidence showing that when people are at home, as they were learning about their rights and they were refusing entry to ICE agents couldn't do anything except to just leave, right? So more people we can train and prepare on that, the better, because that has actually been a very effective tool in terms of protecting individuals and their families at home.
thank you for that. We've been receiving a number of requests to send out some of the resources that you have, that we have sent out, and also what people have placed in the chat. These resources, we will be sending a follow-up email with a recording, the slides, and a lot of these resources have been shared with the chat to everyone who has signed up to watch this programming. So don't worry about that, y'all. We will get all these resources out. So the next thing, I think we're running close. I think we might be able to do one more question. We see, does anyone have websites that track federal court decisions on the issues and raids and detentions? So it looks like
I
there's a
just shared,
link
I
to
just responded to that one. It is litigationtracker.justiceactioncenter.org. So I had to kind of look for that one. Now that link tracks all litigation and not just specifically to the Bakersfield operation or to the LA operations. But those actually have already been in the media. So you can you should go to Google, federal district court opinions for the ICE actions in LA and the ICE actions in Bakersfield. You can look to the UFW Foundation. You can look to them as well. They were the ones who were the lead plaintiff on the Bakersfield operation. That was a big shining moment. And I want to say that it's made a difference, but it's still kind of too soon to tell.
Wonderful. So this actually turned out to be a lot quicker than I anticipated. So we will be moving on to, I'm going to introduce. Thank you everyone for your questions.
Emily, there's one raised hand.
Oh, okay. Albert, you'll be our final question for today. Albert?
Hey there, guys. Sorry about that. I have a question. I'm actually with Shaq and a union member, and I'm also white, obviously, and we're out door knocking every day talking to tenants. But one of the things we've learned is that people are afraid to go to work. And one of the things I was wondering is like, are there programs or people think about programs where people like myself could pick people up and drive them to work, or people pick up groceries and drive them to their house because people are afraid to go out, and then make sure people can stay healthy, families stay healthy, but also, the best way to stay housed is to make sure people can stay employed, and if people are afraid to go to work, that's not so. Just an idea. I'd get some reactions on that.
Perfect. Actually, I'm posting a link in here for you all now. It's Apoyate. This is the mutual aid network launched by Latinas Contra Cancer, recognizing that, hey, people that they kind of need to do more where you can provide that kind of mutual aid support. So that's right now the best resource we have for being able to offer what you just did, Albert, which is like, hey, can I just help drive people to work? Can I help bring groceries? Right. So that launched literally yesterday. Right. So to the extent that you all are down for that, go and sign up, right? And I know Darcy Green, I know the executive director there. She's phenomenal and she does great stuff. So this is a trustworthy site, trustworthy source.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Albert, for the great question. So with that, we're going to do some closing up. I'm going to introduce Allison Singalani, our policy director, with some closing announcements.
Thank you so much, Emily and Hui. What an amazing conversation today, and so timely. I want to thank you all for being here with us today. I also just want to let you know that SB at Home is a membership organization. Your membership is really important to supporting the work that we do, and also the programming like today's programming that we're bringing you. When you join SB at Home, we can leverage our resources, magnify our voices, and work together toward solutions that work for all of us. We believe everyone deserves a safe, stable home they can afford. If you do too, we invite you to join us. There is a QR code on your screen there. We'll also drop a link in the chat that you can use to join us. Next screen, I also want to let you know we have another policy in action coming up. Friday, August 27th from 12 to 1 p.m. We'll be sharing an update about recent state legislation. I do also want to acknowledge, as Emily did, we had lots of great questions. We also had lots of great resources that were shared in the chat today. We'll be following up with an email with a recording and slides from this event. We're going to share as many resources as we can. We'll capture all of those that were in the chat and share those with you as well, along with the calls to action. We really appreciate your desire to be engaged and involved in this, and to work to make sure that everyone in our community is safe and has a stable home that they can afford. So thank you to all of us for joining. We really appreciate having you here with us today. And we hope that you'll join us again next month for our next policy in action. Thank you.